Oh, hi, everybody. Hi. My name is Matt Storrs, and midway through last year, I got to do something that most children only dream of doing. I found a sword on the street. I was walking my dog to the veterinarian, and on my way back, right next to some paint cans that were rusted out, was this sword. And so I did what most New Yorkers, I think, would do. I carried it a mile home. As you can see, it is extremely rusted. It was flaking off. The orange was so pronounced that I was worried that the sword inside had completely rusted and deteriorated. So I ran into a number of issues. I ran into the issue of rust. The fact I didn't have that much sword knowledge. Curses. Sword laws, chemical reactions, and then living my life as a sword person. All things I did not think that I was going to have to deal with, but I was chosen. Much like King Arthur or Joan of Arc, I was destined. I didn't know exactly what my destiny was. It wasn't immediately clear. I figured I had to get the rust off of the sword first, and then my quest and my goal would present itself to me. So what is rust? Rust happens when you have a metal and it forfeits its electrons to oxygen, and then rust occurs. That's rust. All right. So I can only infer that this was exposed to oxygen for an extended period of time, possibly as a lawn ornament of some sort, and it got very rusted. And so somebody decided to throw it away. And I did what normal people would do. I took it to my bathroom. And I used one of my two. I have two bathroom scrubbers, thank you very much. Many people don't believe me, but I do. And I tried to scrub it. And it turns out when you try to scrub with a bathroom brush, really what's going to happen is you're just going to make your bathroom very dirty. But I was doing the best I could. And then I thought, okay, well, I know I've dealt with rust before. I'll use WD-40. And the thing is, when you use WD-40, WD-40 is a water-based solvent. And so really all I was doing was getting the surface rust off and making my hands unbelievably dirty. So I thought to myself, okay, this is rust. Maybe an acid. If I can find an acid, maybe that will take the rust off of this sword. And so I decided to use what acid I had in my home. And so I got a gallon of vinegar. But I didn't want to buy too much vinegar in case it wasn't going to work. So I got a bag from my bodega across the street. And I then was like, okay, I want to make sure that I can get the sword out of the scabbard. So I'll pour all the vinegar into this bag, and then I'll wrap it around the hilt and handle of the sword, and then I'll be able to open it, and then I will be graced by God, or whatever will happen. And so I do that, and I have to lay it at an angle in my bathtub because it starts leaking immediately. But it seems to be working, and mostly with the scabbard itself, removing that first layer of leather. And then people online, because of course I make a video out of this, they say, hey, you know what would work better is if you used Coca-Cola. So I buy gallons of Coca-Cola, and I decide to put that in my bathtub and let the sword soak for as long as possible. Now, before we continue, did somebody just sneeze? I love you. We don't have time to go over it, but I do. Fantastic. So I decide to put it in there, and it's not looking, oh boy. But you can see that some of that metal on the scabbard there started showing through. So I was like, okay, I think I'm on the right track. Now, I realize at this point, I've said some words we probably need to catch up, like what is the structure of a sword? Not everybody is as familiar with swords as I am. And so there are a number of ways to approach a sword. I think the side over here is most easily ascertained, but you have a blade, you have a guard or a hilt, then you have the grip, and then you have a pommel. And what was really nice about posting these videos, people got very invested in my experience with this sword. So they started doing the research that I probably should have been doing from the very beginning. And so they were actually able to find a version of the sword online that had sold for about, $150, $200. And what you'll notice here with the scabbard is that at the base of it is wood. So at some point, my theory was it had been completely submerged in water, and that expanded, and that's why I was having so much trouble opening this sword. It was also around this time that I became aware that not everybody had the frame of reference that I did about like King Arthur and Joan of Arc and the idea of being chosen. There was a whole subset of people that were warning me about a curse. And so it was confirmed that I did have this kind of like a Tai Chi sword because there was the fabric at the end. And I felt really confident that I was going to get into it within the next couple days. So what is a curse? There are a number of points of view about what a curse actually is, whether or not there's an incantation, whether something can be imbued with a curse. And luckily, when it comes to curses, there's a fair amount of literature that you can digest, a fair number of resources, documentaries that provide information. And with swords specifically, there's one that a lot of people referenced. So JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, I don't have enough time to explain, but effectively it's an anime. And part of the way through this anime, Anubis, the Egyptian god of the underworld, possesses a sword. And anybody who unsheathes that sword is then possessed by Anubis. Pretty risky. But then I looked up a picture of Anubis. And I'm like, that doesn't sound that bad. So I decide I'm going to get into this sword no matter what. And so I get a pair of clippers. I start cutting into the scabbard, ripping and tearing metal and leather off of the sword, and stuff doing irreparable damage to my bathtub. And then when I finish, I realize that I have a number of cuts on my hands. So what is tetanus? Tetanus is a disease that you can get. I was initially confused about it. It's not actually from the rust itself. A lot of people, there's a misconception that it comes from rust. It's actually because those rusty things are so covered in bacteria often, and then that bacteria gets in, and that's what gives you tetanus. But I don't know the last time I had a tetanus shot, so I called my doctor. And I'm like, yeah, excuse me, doc, do you know when, can you check my records and see when my last tetanus shot was? They're like, oh, why? Did you step on a rusty nail? And I'm like, no, I actually found a sword on the street, and I've been trying to restore it and ripping metal off of it in my bathroom. And they're like, would you like to come in for a psychological evaluation? We had success. We had a sword. It hadn't deteriorated, but I was still stuck with this persistent rust on the sword, and I had to try and figure out a new way of getting into it. Plus, I didn't have a scabbard or a sheath anymore, so I had to improvise. So I went to CVS and I got a pool noodle, and I put it on there. It did not fit, but that way it wouldn't start deteriorating because it was exposed to oxygen. And it was around that time that my wife got home from her trip. Now, my wife knows who she married. And so when I told her, yes, I found a sword, I've been posting videos about it, I'm making a little bit of money, it's going to be fine. She was like, okay, fine. I love her very much. And I sat on it for a couple days, trying to figure out my next steps. And I reviewed a lot of the comments. And a lot of the comments suggested that I use something stronger than WD-40. Something called PB Blaster, which is an industrial rust remover. So I bought a bottle of it off the internet. And, well, my wife was at work one day. And after reading the back of it, which is just one solid warning, I thought that opening this small window was sufficient to air out my apartment. It worked pretty well. It worked pretty well. It got good. And she came home. She took one step inside and she's like, Matt, you have given me a migraine. I will not be sleeping here tonight. I know. So a migraine is a set of pressure that can build up. And I've given my wife a number of migraines in a number of different ways, usually due to olfactory oversights. But at this point, I was pretty sure that this was the curse and not my fault. Think that makes sense? And so we had to come to a number of agreements, mostly me, saying that I was not going to continue to do stuff inside because it was dangerous. And then a couple days later, when we realized that the PV blaster had gotten into the wood of our bed frame, I also agreed, yeah, I'll get a new bed and a new bed frame. And so all the money that I had made off of these videos went to a great place. And this is the view from a fake hotel. The hotel that she had to get that late at night was not this good. We were pretty sure that the place next to it was a chop shop, so not the best. So I decided to start taking it outside to under an overpass in Astoria, New York. And I loved it, especially because all of the graffiti there, all the murals, were cat-themed, including this Garfield, which has very suggestively growing ivy. And when I initially posted this video, I had to take it down because TikTok thought it was too sexually suggestive. So I get some oil and I get some other things, and I start going to town, removing more and more of the rust. And then I notice next to one of the murals is these kind of fairy houses. And I feel like, yeah, finally I'm turning a corner. I found these fairy houses. I've removed this curse from this sword by unsheathing it. Everything's going to turn around. And so I take a Dremel tool, but it's not working as well as I need it to. Then I run into a problem in that New York City has sword laws. They have weapons laws that if you're carrying around a dangerous weapon, you're breaking the law, shockingly enough. And so every time I was taking the sword under the overpass, I was risking being arrested and being charged with a misdemeanor or worse. So, in the event that you find a sword on the street, let me give you a couple tips. If you get stopped by the police when you are carrying your sword around, you can tell them, like what I did tonight, that you were carrying it around for educational or athletic purposes. Another thing that can be really useful is if you put it into stuff that makes it harder for it immediately to be used. So what I used, obviously, the pool noodle. And then I was like, man, I probably should do a little bit more. The pool noodle might be able to do some damage. So then I got a long cardboard box and put that in it. So I was just a guy walking around with a giant cardboard box and like a tote bag full of oils and and rags. Like if they had stopped me, it would have been a good stop. You know what I'm saying? Like the one good stop that NYPD has ever done. So, how do you remove rust safely? I've been working on this for a number of weeks by this point, and I have been so graced with a number of people that have offered me expert advice. They are very upset with what I have done so far, and they recommend that I use Metal Rescue Rust Remover Bath. And so I'm back after a very polite conversation and patient conversation with my wife. I return to my bathroom, and I pour it into the tub and cover it. And then this time I plan ahead, and I take the air purifier and I put it in the bathroom. I open all the windows before I do it, and I do a sniff test. This is called growth. I also think maybe like it doesn't fill all the way in the bathtub. So I'm like, oh, well, the vinegar worked pretty well. I'll use that. And then I'm like, well, I should probably also use baking soda because then like it'll bubble up and it'll get into the rust and lift it off, right? That's a good hypothesis. So I do that. What happens when you mix vinegar and baking soda? A chemical reaction. Basically, everything disconnects. And so it is a misnomer or misconception that vinegar and baking soda is actually helping you clean anything because it is separating out with that chemical reaction. But it looks really cool. And it looked really cool in the tub. Like, oh man, it's really gonna be effective. And then I noticed this. That's the face on the hilt of the sword. And I'm like, this is a sign. I have finally removed the curse from this sword. It's effective. It also says on the Metal Rescue that if the water remains clear, you can reuse it. But if it turns black, you have to throw it away. But you have to do it safely. And so I figured, yeah, that's not reusable. So I let it go. And I'm left with a tub that is not doing great, but it's fine. Because the sword is looking great. And then at the end, I figured, okay, it's about time I address the pommel at the end of the sword. And it used to have this fabric there. I need to fill it with something. So I decide that I'm going to get a putty, a metallic putty, epoxy, and I'm going to put it in the end. And then I use a cufflink of a palette that I wore one time at a wedding, and I put that in at the end. And I don't know if you've ever posted anything on the internet that you're proud of, but you're wrong. I guess this makes it unbalanced or something like that. I don't know. And so they did not understand the aesthetic that I was going for. But I then also decide that if I'm going to use this for athletic purposes, I need to have a better grip. And so I use a set of gaffer tape that I find on the street. The world provides when you let it. And I tape it up. And then I decide, you know what? This probably would be really useful around the house. I should probably get used to using this for various things. And so I buy a pair of white pants and I decide I'm going to dye those pants. And so I use the sword to open up the writ dye. And then I use the sword to submerge the pants and then stir it around. So I've rusted the sword again. But this time, it's only surface level. I know how to get surface level on. I have gained experience. And so I start using it to move stuff around and point to my Paddington lunchbox, which I'm very proud of. Thank you. So my bathtub is made of acrylic. Yeah, I know. So I bought another set of things to help me fix this bathtub. But it turns out when you use RIT dye, after you use the stuff to cover the cracks and scrapes that the high levels of acid that you've used in your acrylic tub have created, it will dye them purple. I never said that I thought things through, okay? I never said that. But I have hope that I will be able to grind these things down and hopefully get at least some of that security deposit back, but probably not. But look how beautiful the sword is now. Thank you very much. It was a lot of effort, but it really came along and it really started to glisten. And that is not just the after effects of the PB blaster that definitely made me high. I should not have slept in that house. But I have continued to make some videos on it, trying to explain what I've done, and the internet has continued to tell me how wrong I have been throughout the whole process. But I'm proud of what I've been able to accomplish. And I've started taking it out and trying to break the curse that this sword potentially had on my life. And I realized that one way to break curses is to devote yourself to something. So I went to the aquarium in Coney Island, and I made a number of promises and took a very deranged photo that I did not realize was going to be posted until enough people took pictures. So it was up there for like 2 hours. It was a very not busy day. It was quite embarrassing. And I wanted to do good by those fairy houses. And so now anytime I go to touch up the sword, I will also pick up trash in the neighborhood and under the overpass. And to make sure that I am safe when I do this, I got a sword bag. And in proper diligence, or a lack of diligence, I guess, I did not take measurements. So I had to cut the bag so it would fit over the hilt. But it's still good. I promise. Does anybody have any questions? I can take 2 questions. I know. Pretty exciting. Yeah, any questions? Yes. Is that a question about turpentine? Oh, why not turpentine? Well, that's a great question. There's a lot of those questions where it's like, why don't you just do this? It's like, I was really excited to have a project while my wife was out of town. It's really, really what it breaks down to. But, next time I find a sword on the street, I will consider turpentine, definitely. Yes. Yeah, so the age of the sword, so thankfully the sleuths on the internet were able to find it. So it is not the oldest sword, maybe like no more than like 100 years old, but it is, basically for Tai Chi purposes, and it can technically be sharpened, and I'm told I am not allowed to do that. It's one of those agreements that we made. Fantastic. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
Keep it going for Matt Storrs and that sword, everybody. Oh my gosh.